important. Along the path, they found a magical item called a PLG, and it's basically a flashlight. We'll just call it a flashlight, or a pen light, even better. But it's very bright. So when you get to the word PLG, you now know that they found it somewhere, and I can't tell you where. What was that supposed to be? Oh, they are deep in the cave, and they did save some new characters. So they know how to get out at this point, and they're trying to get there. And it's a little complicated when you get to it, because if you already knew, they're looking for a little crawl space, and that's what they're actually looking for. So it's a crawl space. If they can get through it, there is a chimney that will get them out of the caves, and they know they just have to get there, but they have to get through this crawl space first, but they have to find it first. And that's kind of what this reading is going to be about, is about what happens at the crawl space. At this point in the story, there are goblins that are chasing them. They ran into a group of goblins. Goblins, in my books, are quite sinister, actually. They are nocturnal, actually subterranean. So they have big, huge eyes because they don't require that much light, but they need, if there is light, they're very sensitive to light. They have big ears so they can hear better because they use the tunnels in order to hunt. And also very long arms, hairy bodies, smaller than people, big nasty claws. So if you got the idea, there's a spot a couple paces back where we get a really good description of them. So I figure I want you to have an idea of what they look like when we deal with them. And they prefer to hunt with sling stones, and not like sling shots, but the old-fashioned David and Goliath style slings, where it's basically a length of cloth that has a smooth stone in the center, and they twirl it over their heads and fling it, and that's actually how they hunt. So they're quite formidable and nasty. Chapter 40, Time is Lost to Darkness. This was, before I get started, this is also a very complicated chapter, so I'm going to try to read it. There's some very complex sentences in here, so I'll read it slow so we can all get it. Time is lost to darkness. On the run, Raynal led the way with an arrow set on its string, but not drawn. Kadia, right behind him, held her torch high. Steep walls vaulted overhead in the tall cave. Single file, they ran the narrow trail. Gregor also ran with a torch while Weston trailed, carrying a javelin in each hand. Bending ahead to the right, the tunnel continued into the black, but at the bottom of the approaching wall, a wide shadow could be seen. Hold one moment right where you stand, Raynal ordered as he stopped at the corner where the cavern beard left. I always want to say caravan when I get that word. Hold one moment right where you stand, Raynal ordered as he stopped at the corner where the cavern beard left. Everyone stopped behind him. The torchlight lit up the corner, exposing the low shadow as being a crawl space they'd expected. Quickly, the archer leapt into the open corridor. No more than 2 seconds passed, he backstepped behind cover. He waited for another second behind the wall, anticipating the sound of sling stones bouncing off the walls and floor. There were none, so he stepped across the opening and pressed himself next to the wall. Listening more than he watched, he checked for sounds deeper in the darkness. To Kadia he called, "Check it out." She knelt down behind the archer, looking into the crevice. It goes back about 6 feet, then it opens up again. It'll be tight for you men, but Elf Boy and Priestess and I will get through just fine. Gregor stepped closer, but Raynal barked, "Step back. Stay behind the wall over there. You carry light and they'll kill you first. Every goblin hunt I've ever been on, the torchbearers are their first targets." Kadia dropped to her belly, crawling through the hole. Weston pointed at her feet, disappearing under the wall. "Want me to follow her?" "Yeah, make sure she doesn't leave us." Raynal nodded. "What about me?" Gregor asked. Raynal answered, "You get behind me once Weston's boots vanish, then you go. But wait for me on the other side. I'll need light." Raynal listened as ominous sounds echoed through the darkness. Screeching and gibbering rolled from deep within the blackness. With a sigh, he commented, "They're coming back." Gregor's eyes were wide with fright, and Raynal jerked his head, saying, "Come on, get behind me and go fast." Gregor looked back the way they had come and saw the elf leading with the small, bright light projected from his hand. The merchant bounded across the open space to right behind the half-elf. The priestess is on her way. With a snort, Randall remarked, "Is that what the light is? Hurry now. I don't want to be standing here when those goblins get here." The older merchant moved slowly. As he got on his hands and knees, he muttered, "If Solander Breed only saw me down on all fours." He shook his head and moved forward on his belly, sliding across the floor toward the promise of freedom. Randall heard the goblin's high-pitched babbling, accompanying a pitter-patting of bare feet echoing ever closer. The goblins were still far enough that, if the party hurried, everyone could still get underneath, or so he kept telling himself. Papalia arrived as Gregor's feet vanished under the wall. She asked, "Where's Claudia?" He answered, "On the other side with Weston." "What? She'll escape!" Papalia crouched low, seeing Gregor illuminated by the torch. He pushed ahead as he crawled. "I said she is with Weston," Randall reminded with a sarcastic ring. "How about you and I argue when there isn't a swarm of goblins coming after us?" Papalia agreed by lying upon the ground and pushing herself into the hole. Randall tapped Seth with the top of his bow. "You go." Seth shook his head. They need your bow, and I got the wizard here." "I'm not a wizard," Wanker corrected. "Seth," Randall chipped in, "there are a lot of them coming." The warrior nodded. "I ain't deaf." Randall tends to correct Seth a lot when he speaks improper English, so Randall says, I am not deaf," Randall rectified. "No, you're my dumb echo. Now hurry before they all get here." Pausing only to offer Seth a rude finger gesture, Randall dropped to push his backpack and bow first, then pulled himself into the small tunnel. As his voice muffled in the crawl space, Randall informed, "Hey Seth, it gets real tight down here." Roughly elbowing Wanker, Seth grinned. "That's what his girlfriend told me." Seth laughed, trying to ignore the closeness of the approaching mob. Wanker rubbed his shoulder and did not look amused. Whispering through the darkness, the first rock grazed the side of Seth's armor, spinning off between warrior and elf. The second rock clacked loudly off a wall behind Wanker, bouncing into his back. "Aye!" Wanker leapt and ducked at the same time. "Light 'em up, Wank!" Twisting the cap open fully, Wanker pointed the PLG into the dark corridor. Having crept quietly forward, two stone slingers now pulled clawed hands over their big black eyes. Turning and scampering away from the bright light, both goblins retreated, hoping to conceal themselves again in the safety of the darkness. Seth growled, "I hate sneaky goblins. I wish I had something to throw at them." "Hold this." Wanker handed the PLG to the warrior. As Seth's huge hands took hold of the tiny light source, Wanker was already voicing the words of a spell. Twin bolts of light split from the young sorcerer's hand. In the blink of an eye, both energy missiles flashed, searing one boiling burn into the hairy bodies of each retreating goblin. Dual shrieks of pain accompanied the puffs of burnt hair puffing off both goblins. The lightning fragments sent both of them retreating with a swifter stride. Seth laughed. "Yeah, that's how it should be." The noise of the mass of goblins approaching grew in intensity. "You better hurry into that wall, Wank. Even with this light pointer, they might try and rush us." Wanker was already on the floor. He quickly pulled himself beneath, shaking his head. He remembered crawling beneath the barracks at Dilligan's free post. At least there are no spiders here. His feet scrambled, pushing him through the distance onto the other side. As Wanker crawled to the other side of the wall, Seth listened to just beyond the reach of the magical light, where the soft pattering of padded feet slowed. High-pitched growls from angered predators penetrated the dark halls like a mistuned chorus. How many of them were out there, just beyond the light? Many, and many more were coming. The chitterling tongue-clacking boiled over into a din of animosity and hate. Seth knew there must be a leader hidden within that crowd, ordering the pack of hunters. Suspecting the gang was planning something big, he called loudly, "Wank, I hope you're on the other side, because I'm coming now." The first stones flung by the deadly slings crackled all around the warrior. They were blind shots, taken without aim. The light was too bright for the goblins to take clear shots. Randomly trying to pelt him with lethal bullets, rocks cracked like hammer strikes against the back wall. Seth cursed colorfully while dropping down upon his belly, shoving his backpack into the hole first. Next he flashed the PLG into the crevice. cursing again, he spat, "Bane's blood, that is a tight squeeze." Flashing the PLG back at the horde of goblins, he saw the goblins' simple plan laid out. He couldn't see but the silhouettes of the slingers, but their stones were being hurtled over the wall of goblins walking backwards. In the shadow of the backward stalkers, goblins crouched in the shade. Slowly but surely they were coming. There was nothing for Seth to do but push himself through the small crawl space. Sliding into the crevice, the metal rivets of the protective plating on his armor scraped the ground as he slid himself sideways into the hole. Shoving his backpack further through the hole ahead of him, he crammed himself into the hole a little deeper. Holding his right hand outside, he hoped the light would hold the goblins back for a few more precious seconds. Seth pulled himself into the tight space with his left arm. Kicking with booted feet, he pushed himself along the opposite end of the crawl space. He felt the leather cups of his pauldrons grinding against the ceiling with the gritty noise. He heard the angry hunters stalking closer. Seth pushed harder until he jammed himself halfway through the tiny tunnel. It was here that the grind of metal plating and the scrapes of leather ceased. With a frightful lunge, Seth heaved with all the might he could muster in the narrow space. Nothing gave. "Oh shit, help me, I'm stuck." They may not have understood his words, but the approaching goblins certainly comprehended struggle, panic, and fear. As the pattering of clawed feet hurried closer, he knew they would soon have him.
And you quit.
And I quit, just like that.